In this video, we'll discuss the features on Mike Tyson's face that point to aggressive tendencies as well as robust bodily strength. Enjoy. Hey there, good people. We've got, for our face reading today, Mike Tyson. I'm reading him because Mike Tyson has a fight coming up with Jake Paul tomorrow night. Currently, it's Thursday right now. Friday on Netflix, he's got a free fight. It's the first time he's fought in a long time. I'm pretty interested in seeing that fight for what it's worth. I haven't seen Mike Tyson fight, but he's a legendary boxer, one of the greatest boxers that ever lived. So before we jump into his features, if you are new to my channel, welcome. I'm happy to have you here. But please go up here and watch the 5-minute crash course face reading video. That's very important if you've never seen a face reading. That'll give you terms and terminology, what face reading is and isn't. And as always, please, if you are finding value in my content in any capacity, please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification, share this with anyone that will find it interesting. That's how my channel grows, and I appreciate it. So let's talk about some of the things I saw on Mike Tyson's face right out of the gates. First and foremost, he's got a pretty dominant bone structure. He's got a big chin that relates to the willpower, and if you're going to be a boxer, you're going to need that if you're going to be a fighter. He's also got a really dominant brow bone. So his brow bone, his eyebrows, I won't go into the eyebrows just yet because it's not part of the bone structure, but if you look at his cheekbones, the brow bone, his chin, his jaw, the thickness of his neck, something that we don't typically talk about in face reading, but you want to think that the neck is the foundation for the skull, and on the skull rests the face. So it's sort of, you can think of the neck a little bit like the root system of your body to a degree too. So if you think of the face as being a harmonic for the entirety of the body, the neck is sort of the foundation for that system. So you will see a lot of fighters, a lot of wrestlers will have big, thick necks. If you look at this picture from when Mike Tyson was young, big, thick neck. Now, mind you, he did train his neck. He did all these crazy rolling exercises because the stronger the neck is, the better you take impact and the less risk of injury because the cervical vertebrae are the upper spine. The thoracic is the mid-spine, the lumbar is the low back, and the bones get bigger the lower you go on the spine and more delicate the way you go up. So a thick neck from an evolutionary standpoint was favorable in battle and in combat because this is the most delicate part of the spine. So in terms of form and function and how people fit into life, you'll see this trait. So that's something to think about. Now, the other thing that I was drawn to were his eyes. So we have to talk about the framing of his eyes and the way his eyes actually set in the skull. So action-oriented eyebrows, especially in his youth, the check marks, okay? This is a person who is decisive, quick to act, quick to think, quick to choose. Now, if you're going to be a boxer, right, a lot of it is move, dodge, evade, strike. There's a lot of quick time action that has to take place if you're going to be a good boxer. So in terms of just the big building blocks of Mike Tyson's face, what I see in him, what he has done in his life, there is congruency there. Now, the dominant brow bone and what I call replicating harmonics, patterns that show up again on the face. So if you look at his eyebrows, they are like this, the action-oriented. He's also got this wrinkle right in the center of the forehead, kind of low above the brow bone, that does the same thing. It's a replicating line to a degree. Trump has these also. So Trump has more forehead wrinkles that do this, but his eyes do this. Trump's eyes are also squinty and kind of point. So we see like this replicating thing that happens in Trump's face. But when you see a replicating pattern, a replicating shape, it's sort of like further energy or more energy being expressed in that area. So for him, wood metrics. Wood metrics, if you watch my content, you'll know relate to vigor, aggression, tenacity, and it can be overkill, right? I mean, we know Mike Tyson. If you don't know Mike Tyson and you listen to his interviews, he used to say that he used a lot of anger. He bottled anger and rage because he had a pretty rough childhood. He really bottled that and used that as fuel for his fighting. You'll also notice as he got older, his left side, okay, the eyebrows started to get thin. When we see the eyebrows get thin, usually from the face reading perspective, it's indicative of a couple things. One can be hormonal imbalance, specifically with the thyroid. I don't know if Mike Tyson has thyroid problems, but when we see that, that's one possibility. The other one is when we have a dominance of an element on our face, there's a tendency for us to overuse it. Mike Tyson has been self-admittedly on podcasts and has said, I used anger too much. I became an angry and miserable person. That anger came at a very real taxation to his life force and how he lived. And interestingly enough, the counterpoint to the wood metrics, vigor, aggression, tenacity, that's the dark side. It can be wielded well, but it's the dark side. The light side is kindness and compassion. So if you listen to Mike Tyson now, the man has become considerably softer. That doesn't mean he's not still an animal. If you've watched his training videos in the recent weeks and months, he still is incredibly fast. His trainers say he still hits incredibly hard. So you can't take the warrior out of him, but he has settled down. He's also become an advocate for psychedelics. And that was a big piece of how he sort of digested and transformed his aggressive tendencies. So this is why I'm an advocate for psychedelics, which is kind of a controversial stance these days because not everyone can get behind it because it does alter the mind. But there's very real research about psilocybin and what it does. I have worked with and have seen PTSD vets, military vets, who really are shell-shocked from combat, being in the Iraq War, the Gulf War, just being in that sphere, police officers as well, who have had to see or do horrible things, and the psilocybin, which facilitates something called neurogenesis, actually rewires the brain and helps the person adapt better. So I do find that interesting, and many paths to the top of the mountain, but Mike Tyson did get that and has gone down that road. Now, another thing I want to talk about is the tattoo on his face. So yes, was he born with this? Of course not. Okay, I know it's an addition. Yes, it's an augmentation, but we have to sort of look at it from the perspective in the same way we look at Botox or facial augmentation surgery or anything like that. Anytime we're augmenting the face, there's an attempt to express what is happening on the inside. It's an external marker for what's going on inside. Now, I don't know why he picked the left side, but if we're going with the whole subconscious marker theory, the left side relates to the inner persona, the right side relates to the public persona. So his left side, he put the Maori tattoo, that warriorhood symbol on the inner persona, which sort of, to me, is an indicative marker that Mike Tyson is a warrior at heart. So we see these augmentations that can happen in people, but those are some key things to think about when you're looking at Mike Tyson's face. Now, I did do his natural face, public persona, and inner persona. And if you look at the inner persona, the eyes are softer. He still looks formidable for sure on the inner persona side, but the public persona has a bit more tenacity. And look at the chin on the public persona side, wider, that willpower. So a boxer, a fighter, there's a certain amount of showmanship. It's how the world sees you. And it's also an indicative marker of what's happening inside as well. So his public image, right, that public persona chin of willpower and pushing through, the will to live, the will to pursue, the will to train, pretty big on his public persona side. The left side is softer, but I think if you look at his face, what you're looking at is the public persona is the fighter, who he was and what he put to the external world. The inner persona is a bit more of who he actually is. That's the guy you're dealing with when you talk to him. Again, still very tenacious. Now, the other thing I want to kind of rewind a little bit and go back to the eyebrows. He's got that wrinkle at the forehead that does this, the eyebrows that do that, and then he's got an inverse harmonic, an inverse pattern with the eyes doing this. The sheltered, right, or the hooded eyes. So the hooded eyes are about protection. They're about shielding from the outside world a bit. It's a person who can be prone on the dark side to telling little white lies to get what they want, but also sheltering themselves from the world. If you look at Mike Tyson's life terrain, it's very rough. He had a very rough childhood, had a lot of inner turmoil. Those eyes are sort of like a helper or an external marker saying the person might go through some pretty heavy things, but they also have the shelter to weather the conditions of life. But he does have the opposite, right? So his eyes do this and the eyebrows do that, making this kind of triangle shape, right? This at the bottom, this at the top. There's an implied triangle, and the triangle relates to fire, tenacity, spirit, willpower. All of those things connect into that. So I find this really interesting, in looking at his face. If Mike Tyson had not become a boxer and I had met him in his youth, after the age of, 24, 25 is the range when you're supposed to start reading people, I would say, you're probably well suited for athletics. You're well suited for vigorous training. You're well suited for those aggressive bodily activities. That would be one of the biggest things that I would be telling him. But these are the key things that I saw about Mike Tyson. So, as always, I appreciate your time. If you guys have questions or comments, please put them down below. Thanks a bunch.